Well, greetings, viewers, voyeurs. You're with Got That Funk. This is a video response to Dan Brown, also known as Pogo Bat here on YouTube. Dan's channel is very well subscribed. And Dan, despite the fact I've been a fan of yours for over 2 years, I've never sent you a video response, so I think it's about time I did. And I thought your video about whether or not internet access ought to be a human right was a good place for me to start. So, hi, how's it going? Anyway, I watched your video with some interest, and I have to say that I agree and disagree with some of your thinking, Dan. So let me just talk about the parts where I agree first. I absolutely agree that human beings the world over ought to have free and open access to as much information as each individual desires, and that the internet is a pretty much tailor-made means of disseminating information which could, help people achieve that goal. Having said that, I don't believe that access to the internet really could be a human right for several reasons. First of all, as far as I'm aware, and of course I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, nowhere on paper in any country in the world, nor in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, do human beings have the right to clean water or clean air. And frankly, it seems to me if I don't have the right guaranteed to me to breathe clean air, the right to go on the internet seems a bit obscene by comparison. Um, Also, access to the internet depends on certain things. It depends on electricity. It depends on access to some kind of mass communications network. We've had electricity in domestic homes now for well over 100 years. We've had telephones for well over 100 years in domestic homes. And yet the UN's never seen fit to ascribe those things as human rights, despite the fact that access to electricity in the home and telephones in the home can be shown to improve the overall lives of the cultures where the infrastructure exists for such things. Access to the internet also depends, of course, on having some sort of computer terminal, or at the very least some kind of mobile phone or other interface with the internet. Again, many countries in the world either haven't got the means or the will or both to provide the kind of infrastructure necessary to disseminate these types of things to the whole of their population, or even most of their population. So I think it's a bit rich to insist to other countries that they ought to provide things for their citizens like the internet when they haven't been able to provide the basics of electricity and telecommunications, on which the internet depends. So I think that's a pretty big deal there, don't you? Also, I would argue that every nation has the right to its own sovereignty. Now, I'm 49 years old, Dan, and I'm old enough, therefore, to have very clear memories of the Cold War. And once upon a time, what they used to call the Iron Curtain, all the Eastern countries in Europe, as well as the Soviet Union, and even the People's Republic of China, for a long, long time, were closed countries. And by closed countries, I mean that they discouraged travel in and out of the country and discouraged media and information going out of the country and into the country to a fairly large degree. They wanted the right to run their societies internally the way they saw fit. And whilst I would object to that where human rights are being violated, which was certainly the case in the old communist era, I wouldn't necessarily object to it in principle if human rights of the citizens involved were not being violated. So I think sovereignty really needs to matter. I kind of don't like the trend worldwide where sovereignty is seen almost as a luxury of the wealthy countries, but less wealthy countries have something less than actual sovereignty. I don't like the way it seems to be going in that regard. Also, I will say this about access to the internet and whether it should be a right or not. I'm absolutely behind the idea that human beings should have access to all the information they want. But when it comes to the internet, we have to ask ourselves who owns the internet. And if we say no one owns the internet, that's fine. But who owns the access to the internet? I'm relatively sure that I recently read, and I wish I could remember where. If I could remember where, I would leave you a link, but I can't remember where, so, you know, I'm sorry. But I'm pretty sure I read someplace a couple of months ago that the US government wants the right to be able to turn the internet off. I think the whole of humanity would be pissed off if that ever happened, although I'm pretty sure the only reason the United States would ever take such a step would be to preserve its own national security. Even so, people are going to bitch about it the worldwide if such a thing ever happened. But where I'm going with this is we in the Western world tend to think of our, we're proud of our democracies. We're proud of the level of freedom and liberty that we tend to enjoy. But it's easy to forget that there's no such thing as total liberty, and there's no such thing as a perfect country, and there is no such thing, unfortunately, as a government who is completely trustworthy. And my problem with this notion that we all have the right to the internet presupposes that no one can take this right away from us. And that's just not the case. Access to information ought to be free and open, absolutely. But even in Western countries, everyone bitched about how Pakistan shut down Facebook last year as a response to Everyone Draw Muhammad Day. But look at what happened in Western countries last autumn when WikiLeaks was starting releasing the diplomatic cables in the whole Cablegate affair. Websites were getting shut down by Western governments. Well, I should put it a different way. Due to pressure by Western governments, websites disseminating information freely were being shut down by pressure from our Western governments. If we can't even rely on our own Western governments who supposedly espouse the notions of free information, it's a bit rich to rely on governments who are traditionally and more openly repressive. So we've got a long way to go to guarantee people access to information. And I understand the goal of it is worthwhile. But to ascribe the internet as a human right, I think, is a misplaced endeavor to achieve that goal. I hope I put that well. Anyway, Dan, thank you for your interesting video. Keep it up. Until next time, everybody, may all your ups and downs be ups.